soon as you swing your leg over, the intent of the 390 Enduro R becomes so clear. This has been carefully designed to thrive in the dirt. So in terms of the ergonomics, even when you compare it to the 390 Adventure, the seat is nice and flat, giving you a lot of room to move around. It comes almost all the way to the handlebar. So you have the option of riding this like an MX bike with your balls all the way to the front, loading the front, or to stand up and ride. The handlebar itself again is wide and flat, giving you this really nice and upright riding position. And also in terms of the rider's triangle, when you stand up and ride, I'm 5'11", and I think this fits me like a glove. I'm already in this nice, commanding, aggressive riding position, ready for whatever the terrain is going to throw at me. The bike feels really slim between my legs, very easy to hold on to, and that's primarily down to the smaller 9-liter tank. And when you finally start rolling, what will truly blow you away, or at least in my books, what makes this perhaps the best dual-purpose motorcycle that I've ever ridden, is just how unintimidating it is to ride. 890mm seat, really tall suspension. It does feel very intimidating on paper, but when you actually get on it and you start riding, what really catches your attention is the amazing weight distribution, the mass centralization that KTM have achieved. This in fact reminds me so much of the 790 Adventure or the 890 Adventure R, which has the tank lower down for lower center of mass, which essentially means that even when you're riding in the dirt, it feels like you're riding on the road. You have the same feeling, the same feedback. Even when you compare this to your X-Pulses or any adventure bike that you have ridden, it's so much easier to ride. Because that's the second thing, compared to these bikes which feel a lot more top heavy and difficult to manage, this one also feels a whole lot lighter. It's not the lightest motorcycle, it's only 5 kgs lighter than the 390 Adventure, but at 177 kgs, you don't really feel them as soon as you start rolling. And the next is of course the most controversial part in regards to this motorcycle. When it was launched in India, it was launched as the Indian spec version, which did not have the same suspension travel, and that is why I hated on KTM India the most, because this is what I wanted, and I'm equally happy that they have launched the International Spec, which is a motorcycle which has all the travel that KTM had envisioned it with. You have 230 mm of travel at the front and the back, which also gives you 272 mm of ground clearance. Now, in case you're wondering why is this so important, that's because if you look at the 390 Adventure or even the Indian spec Enduro R, those bikes are enough and more capable. They'll take you wherever it is that you want to go. The only problem arises when you're an idiot like me and you go on the dirt and you also like to go fast. And those bikes will go fast up to an extent, but thereafter the suspension is what limits them. Because up until that point, you will feel like, oh wow, you know, I'm going really quick and the bike is taking everything in its stride, and then you'll hit a pothole or two, enough to bottom out the suspension, and then the next thing you know, you're up in the air and bracing yourself for possibly the worst crash ever at a very high speed. So I came very close to quite a few of the situations on both of those bikes, and that put the fear of God in me. And that's when I was like, no, this is what I need. Yeah, you need the suspension travel to give you that buffer. So now, as soon as this motorcycle came and we hit some of the gnarliest trails and I tried to go as fast as I possibly can, I never once found myself in that situation, because that's where the extra suspension travel really comes into play and gives you that assurity of that it really has your back. Will you ever hit the limit of even this much travel? For sure. But it would just mean that you would have to be going at least another 30 to 40 kilometers per hour faster on the same terrain. And I don't have the capability, I don't have the talent, I don't have the balls to do exactly that. The only place where I did find the limitations of the suspension when I was jumping it, and as soon as, of course, when I landed, no matter how much compression I had dialed in, the suspension did bottom out. But then again, that's not fair to this motorcycle, because I know it's called the Enduro, but it's not really an Enduro per se, right? Because it still weighs 177 kgs, and there's really no way to get around that weight. If that is your intention, you're possibly better off going with an MX motorcycle, because that's what the motorcycles are really meant to do. You have even more suspension travel and you have a very light motorcycle. This was designed to be a dual purpose, and barring jumping and landing hard, I think this motorcycle is plenty capable to take you wherever it is that you want to go at a blisteringly fast pace. As long as you know what you're doing, you're technically that strong. And of course, you will have to tweak the suspension. But that's what I love about this bike. Even the suspension is really sensitive to the smallest of clicks. You have default settings that KTM recommends, and then even when you're playing around with the suspension with just a few tweaks, just with a few clicks of the compression and rebound at the back, you feel the bike transform and is so much more reactive and in tune with whatever it is that you want to do. And it's the small details which of course make all the difference. Like, what I love the most about this suspension is also the fact that you can adjust it on the go with just your hands. You do not need any special tools. Even for the rear rebound, you just need the key to make the changes. It's so much easier and convenient when you have a suspension setup like that. And similarly, another big factor what makes the International Spec Enduro R so good off-road is also the fact that it's running a 2118 setup, wheel setup. Now, if you compare it to the 390 Adventure, you of course still have the 21-inch front, but you have a 17-inch rear on that motorcycle. This, I feel, the 2118 setup, I feel, is a much better setup in terms of the balance, and yeah, it just gives you so much more confidence, and the bike feels so much more sure-footed. This was my first experience ever riding on the meters, and they proved to be quite capable. Again, they are not hardcore off-road tires, they are like dual purpose tires, like 50/50, and for most part they provided all the grip that I needed for the kind of terrains that I was riding in. I'm not so sure how great they would be in the really slushy, muddy kind of terrain, but in the mixed condition is where I felt that they did not really have the best grip. But otherwise, even on the road, we got stuck in a really crazy downpour with a lot of waterlogging, and still the tires were really up to the task. Next, you of course also have the brakes, which are phenomenal in terms of the bite and the stopping power that you have at your disposal. I was a little bit worried because you have a smaller disc up front compared to a 320 mm on the 390 Adventure, the same two-pot caliper. But I think the sintered pads make the biggest difference, to the point where I feel that if you had any more stopping power, it would have been an overkill, especially when you're riding in an off-road terrain. So again, brakes for me are a big check, not only in terms of the stopping power, but also the feel and the feedback that you get, which is something which you need, especially when you're talking about this engine. An engine which I have come to love ever since I tried it first on the Duke 390. Really love how it feels in the off-road mode. On this motorcycle, you just have two modes. You have the street and the off-road. Off-road, of course, is really good because it's a lot more responsive. And even compared to the 390 Adventure, what helps this bike feel even more peppy is the final drive. The rear sprocket on this is a little bit bigger, which helps you keep it in the torque band that much easier. Yeah, just the way the power comes in, it's so easy to loft the front wheel up in the air to get over obstacles. I never thought I had the capability, but then the bike just makes your life so much easier, because with the suspension travel and just by moving the weight and the brap from the engine, you can easily hoist the front wheel to get over whatever it is that you want to get over. Having said that, that's where I also encountered some of my biggest problems with this bike, and that is how often it's stalled. I'm not 100% sure if it's the fueling, because the fueling otherwise is fantastic, but when you're on zero throttle and you first crack open the throttle, I think there's a small delay before the power comes in, and that is enough to get the motorcycle to stall all the time. I know what you're thinking. Yes, this one does get the crawl feature just like the 390 Adventure, but it's not, again, the most consistent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times when I trusted it, the bike still stalled and got me in a very awkward position, almost led me to drop the bike. So yeah, that is one problem which definitely needs to be fixed. As this is an enduro bike, it's designed to go in some really narrow spaces. For whatever reason, I think with the ergonomics, I felt like the turning radius was a little bit on the longer side, or at least that's how it felt compared to the 390 Adventure, which is not what you expect from enduro. You expect it to be really agile, really easy to maneuver in the tightest of places. That's where I felt like, in terms of the turning radius, I felt like it can do with a little bit more. And then the last point, of course, is the fact that you do not get tubeless spoke wheels like on the 390 Adventure, which I know is done on purpose because this is again a proper enduro kind of motorcycle. KTM expects you riding it in a particular way, and this is definitely a safer bet on that front. But that is one thing that you need to take into account, the possibility of a puncture and how well prepared you are, especially if you plan to ride this in the middle of nowhere. The next big problem with this motorcycle is, of course, the side stand error, which prevents the motorcycle from starting. Even when the side stand is up, you have to give the side stand a nice big kick to again slot him back in place or whatever, high enough for the sensor to back off and let the engine to crank. Now, this has obviously been spoken about by quite a few people, and this definitely needs to be looked into, considering the fact that you will be taking this motorcycle in the middle of nowhere, and that's the last place you want to encounter this problem, where just because of the side stand sensor, the bike just won't start. And as this is a dual purpose motorcycle, we of course have to also talk about how it does on the road. And to be honest, it actually quite surprised me, because all the factors which work to its advantage here off-road also work for it on the road. For example, you have all the travel necessary and adjustable suspension to tweak it as per any kind of road surface that you'll encounter on our Indian roads. You have a motorcycle which is beautifully balanced, which is mass centralized, which feels a lot lighter to ride, very easy to ride, despite its really tall 890 mm seat. Yes, that is going to be a little bit of a challenge if you are 5'9" or shorter, but if you're 5'10" and taller, I think you should be able to at least have one foot firmly on the ground. Bike also, because of the leverage of the wide handlebar, is very easy to slice and dice through traffic. You have a lot of leverage. In terms of the engine, with the bigger rear sprocket and the crawl feature, you have decent tractability as well, especially in the off-road mode. I think the engine is really nice and responsive. But from a touring perspective, this is obviously not the best, because you only have a 9-liter tank. You have no wind protection whatsoever. And even though the ride quality is not a problem, the seat itself is not designed keeping comfort in mind. And also the engine, as good as it is, it has its same set of problems in terms of vibrations like we experienced on the 390 Adventure. So to summarize, yeah, this bike does have its share of problems, but I think these are quick fixes, something which can definitely be done very, very quickly. And if KTM India managed to do it, I think this is undoubtedly the motorcycle to buy if you consider yourself an off-road enthusiast. A motorcycle which is very easy to ride, very unintimidating, which has really good weight distribution, really good riding dynamics, is perfect ergonomically. A bike which is really capable in terms of the suspension setup, and also one which has an engine which can put a smile on your face. The very fact that you can still take this home for 3.53 lakhs despite the GST hike, this bike is an absolute no-brainer.